Here's one of the funny part, though, that I firmly believe in, is that my job is to work my way out of my job.
Welcome to Driving Change, where we go for a drive with leading technology executives and dig deep into their beliefs, habits, routines, and influences. Today we take a ride with Phil McKoy, CIO of Aimia, and discuss a variety of topics from the changing role of the CIO, staying relevant, advice for up-and-coming tech leaders, balance, and fishing from a kayak.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good to see you. You might be warm in that jacket.
Yeah?
I don't know.
No, I'm
It's
good.
a little warm out.
I'm good.
All right, let's go for a drive. Thanks for meeting me.
Oh, no problem. I figure what the heck they're doing on that side of the road.
So we're gonna go quick over to Bull Run Coffee. I've been trying to explore all the cappuccinos in town, and
Is that a particularly good one?
that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
So I want to try it out. So hopefully we'll be able to have enough time to make it over there and back. And along the way, it's rerouting me now. Along the way, then we can ask some questions.
Cool. Perfect.
But
That works.
so we met, I think it's been a couple years now. So we met when you were leading technology over at Target.com.
Yeah.
And since that time, you changed gears and positions, and now you're the CIO over at Aimia. How's that?
It's great.
Change been for you?
It's been a great change. You know, it's a much smaller company, and there's so much that goes with that around, you know, team, function, culture, decision making, and it's not that one is bad and one is good.
It's different.
It's different, and
Yeah.
for me right now, for where I am in my life and my career, it's a welcome change.
So how do you see the role? Like you went from leading .com to a CIO role. How do you see the role of the CIO changing from years past?
Well, I think it's a much more strategic role than I think it has been in the past. You know, I think traditionally, you know, you hear, and it differs by organization certainly, but I think traditionally CIO role has been viewed as sort of this operational, tactical support function, if you will, right?
Yep.
Cost center, if you will. And I think what's changing, and it's really clear in the role that I'm in the business that I'm in, is that it's as much a revenue driver as any other role in the organization. And in organizations like mine, where, you know, a big part of what we do is sell not only loyalty services and strategy, but loyalty platforms, it becomes the core tenet that we go to market with.
Yep.
And it may not be how we make, that might not be what we make money on,
Yep.
but it's how we frame up all of the other value-added services that we deliver to our clients. So for me as a CIO, for this CIO role, I'm at the table in any and all business growth discussions, not just the operational questions that might come up from time to time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fundamentally different than what CIO roles have been in the past.
Yeah, so how do CIOs that are in that traditional landscape stay relevant or become relevant?
Know the business.
They know the business.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's it. You know, and so when I took this job, if you will, you know, working at Target, knowing the business was somewhat intuitive because of its retail, right?
Yep.
We were all, you know, and there's an intuitive understanding of retail as a domain because we were all shoppers. In this business, it was a bit tougher because understanding the notion and the nature of loyalty and actually how you make money selling and driving loyalty programs, I had to learn the business.
Yeah.
And that was priority number one. And I actually spent more time with the client and business teams than I did with perhaps my own technical teams in the first 90 days.
Okay.
Because I didn't think that I could influence what we needed to do differently in the IT teams and the technology teams if I didn't understand what the business was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So that became priority number one for me, was better figure out what the heck's going on here from a strategic standpoint, how we make money, where technology factors in how we make money, where the P&L teams see technology in their strategy.
Yep.
And then you can go back and effectively lead because you understand what you're trying to achieve.
Yep. With all the change in technology, which is changing business faster and faster, how do you stay on top of, or how do you know you're using the right technologies, the right methodologies?
Yeah. So, I think that's a really interesting question, because as a CIO, I think that if you believe that you can be, or you should be, the world's authority on all innovation and technology, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so what I've done, especially in this space, is I read a ton. You read market analysis, whether it's Forrester, Gartner. You read competitive insights. I spend time with the sales teams on when we win, when we lose, just to get a sense of why are we winning, why are we losing, and what's the role that technology plays there. And so I use that to sort of get insight on relevancy and where are we in terms of the overall technology curve. And then when it gets down to the specifics of technologies, whether it's platforms or OSs, I'm not a deep technical guy, but I make sure I have those people on my team. And then the key piece that I do is I listen to them, right? And I give space to the engineers and the architects on my team to come talk to me, and I make their input valuable, right? And so those guys get to a point where they have a sense and a feeling that they can come talk to me. And from that's actually where I get some of the greatest insights, is the 25-year-old on my team that's telling me about some technology that I frankly never heard of, and why he thinks it's cool. And I can ask questions on, great, you think it's cool, how's it going to make us more money? And so I realize the limits of my ability to know all, be all on the latest and greatest, and make sure that I understand what the market's doing and have people on my team where I encourage their inquisitiveness, and leverage that to keep me informed.
Yeah, so really using a team. So how do you get that 25-year-old on your team that's loves technology, into technology, and they have all these different offers, all these different companies to go to in town?
Show them that it matters. You call it what you want. I don't actually, people say, well, it's a millennial thing. I don't believe that to be true. I think people want to be in a place where their input and their voice is heard and it matters. And we haven't done as much hiring of as much as I would like to, of the 25-year-old engineer. But as I look across my team and I see, and it's not that doesn't have to be the 25-year-old engineer. It can be the architect that's been on the team for 20 years. That has a wealth of experience and just wants to be heard. I make their voices matter. I give them visibility. I stand up for them in the tough moments where we have challenging conversations with our client teams, and I create an inherent sense of value that they're a part of helping this company make money. And people love that stuff. These people, we work for a for-profit company. And that ability to tie those things together, I think, is very powerful for engaging your team.
They want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to be part of that difference. They want to see it.
They do.
So doing that and empowering them really helps. But you can't isn't always an easy thing. Sometimes they have to do a small task that just, this task needs to be done because it's part of a bigger task.
But if they're engaged, if your team's engaged, they will work through a lot of, I always say this to people, and I say it to a lot of people here at Aimia, is just because someone's doing a really tough job, that in and of itself doesn't lead to disengagement. Because some of the hardest things I've ever done have been when I've been the most engaged. And what it is, it's purpose, it's connectivity. That's what I think motivates people. And you can get your team to do a whole lot if there's a sense of purpose and connection to what you're asking them to do.
Some developers and business technology type people love just to stay in the pocket and just want to work on technology, want to code, want to do that stuff. And then there's these other people that that's the first step to where they want, and they're more interested in the business, they're more interested in management, want to get to that leadership role like you've gotten to. If you look back and you could give yourself advice back when you were 20 years old, now, what would you tell yourself to do that, one, what you did that was correct, and what else you could have done?
Yes, it's a great question. So for me, I wish I'd become a deeper coder. Which is really interesting now because, so I grew up in Accenture, and I think, Accenture had a very standard process. You start off, I remember going to St. Charles and, learning C++, and then I even learned a little COBOL along the way. And there was this idea of you needed to be able to code to have credibility and broad understanding of what you were pitching to clients. And I get that, but the coding really only lasted for about 6 months to a year. And then you quickly moved into these leadership roles. And that was the Accenture formula, and it worked. It was a good formula. But I actually wish I could sling some code. I really do. I wish I was a better engineer than I am. Because I think you get to a place where I am now, where my BS meter isn't as fine-tuned as it was 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, because technology has evolved as rapidly as it has. And yes, you can depend on your team, but like I want my BS meter to be probably more fine-tuned than it is right now. And so I wish I had a deeper engineering sense. So I guess that's what I would tell my 22-year-old self, is maybe stick with the engineering a bit longer.
What do you think you did do well that got you to where you're at, that you did have that focus on, that propelled you, that maybe some others may not have?
I think I focus on the business.
Okay.
I think that's always been my eye. I think I focus on what are we trying to achieve, not technology for technology's sake. I'm never going to get into a .NET Java argument with anyone, right? I focus on what are we trying to achieve, and I think that focus has always helped me be a bridge, have the right perspective. I think one of the biggest challenges we all have as technology leaders is being able to have intelligent discussions with our business partners. And I think that's always been a strength of mine, to be able to frame what we're doing for technology clearly in the eyes of business objectives, whether it's revenue, whether it's cost, whether it's efficiencies, whatever it might be, being able to always bring it back to that end goal.
So from a tactical level, let's say we have someone that's mid-20s, they're a technologist. Is it finding opportunities for them to ask those, be in environments where they can ask those questions to the business? Is it networking, going to lunch with some of the business people? When is it appropriate for them to do that, if that's not really part of their 9-to-5 job?
I think all the time.
Okay.
Know how you make money. Like I think it's such a simple statement. You would be amazed how often I've met with a team or a team member, and like, do you know how we make money? I just asked this question at a leadership offsite we had yesterday. I said, like, do you think our team understands how we make money. Because if you don't understand what your business is, I don't think you can ever be effective in supporting it.
Yep.
Because you may see innovations along the way, or it's going to be the person that's in the depths of the team that's going to be able to figure out some of the greatest innovations, and to be able to connect. Well, if you want to do ABC, or you want to reduce costs, and one of the ways you do that is to make a particular process or application run faster. And all of a sudden, you've got this smart technologist, a smart engineer who can, say, I can take X number of milliseconds out of this process, and I'm going to do it because I know that if I do that and I can cut time off, it's worth X number of basis points to bottom line. And being able to make those connections, I think, is absolutely critical for folks throughout their technology professionals to advance their careers.
So kind of we're on the same lines of kind of looking back and also looking at it as your current staff too.
Yeah.
Was there something maybe earlier in your career you had a belief about within business itself or technology itself that you're the polar opposite now that has changed?
I think earlier in my career, I focused a lot on cost and not as much on results. This notion that because you can do something less expensively, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, I grew up in Accenture, and then even in Target, in a paradigm of shifting more and more work offshore, and involved the standing up Target India, right? And it's not to say that model doesn't work. It absolutely does.
It has a place.
But I think I've become much more intentional around the decisions to focus on cost.
Okay.
And I think as I spend more time in this space, you start getting into true TCO, especially when you're attuned to business results, that might make you operate slightly differently than you would have before.
What's one thing that you do in a leadership role that might be a little bit different than other people?
I think I try and stretch the hell out of my team. And it's interesting because you have to find the talent that matches the way you lead. But I firmly believe that you got to give the people you work for as much rope as possible, and as much guidance and as much coaching. But I think autonomy and empowerment are two of the biggest tools that you can use in developing your talent. And I just firmly believe you got to do that. You have to be able to let your team run.
Then you're supposed to say that you're supposed to work your way out of a job.
Yep, that too. Yeah. Well, I think you have to be.
Do you really believe that?
Absolutely.
To start and work your way out of a job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because
is that scary for people though? Don't they want to keep their job?
It's not scary for me. Because in the end, I don't view myself as being at the end of my career, right? There's always something else that I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be able to leave a legacy of competence behind you as you move forward. I firmly believe. I mean, I feel like I've heard people say this. I actually think one of the biggest tributes to good leaders are when you look at their progeny, if you will. And you hear this a lot in coaching. Like you hear this all the time in sports coaching. Sort of who are all the Bobby Knight disciples, or who are all the the Krzyzewski disciples.
Yep.
And I love that idea. This idea of do you develop people well enough that they go on to bigger and better things? And I think people should do that.
Who's someone that did that for you?
Lots of people. I mean, that's actually, I think I've been remarkably blessed. I always joke around that one of my favorite bosses was Ken Kaiser.
Okay.
I think Ken absolutely absolutely did that for me. So give me the rope to run. So I would put Ken in that mix. Other people that I would put in that mix. There's a partner I worked really closely with at Accenture, Mike Rogalski, who was the same way, where just a lot of leeway, a lot of stretch. I've had these points in my career where that you call those inflection points.
Yep.
And more often than not, it's been where there's been a leader in place who has moved on to something else, and it's left a void that they've taken a flyer on me to go fill.
Okay.
And I try and embody that in how I lead people. I take flyers on people all the time, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think if the people underneath you know that you trust them, and that you're willing to stretch them, and that you'll back them up when they make mistakes, they'll do a hell of a lot more for you.
Makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that was the first time I've been to Bull Run, but this
good.
It's really good. I want to do a cappuccino, but it is way too hot outside to do that right now.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
So moving to something a little bit different, there's something that you and I have in common that not a lot of people have in common. we both have 5 kids.
Making babies.
Yeah, making babies.
Yeah.
In today's kind of world, you don't really see that often.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to ask about, to me, they always say, how do you guys do that? And typically my answer is not always successfully, but we're always trying.
Yeah.
How do you answer that question? Is that a question that you get asked?
I get asked a lot. I mean, I get asked a lot. People always say, how do you juggle everything?
Yeah.
And the first thing I always say is, I'm nobody's example of balance. I do what works for me, right? And so if you wanted to look at me and say, work-life balance, I don't know what that is. And for me, I look at, do I have the time to tend to what's important in my life? And work is one of those things. It doesn't float to the top of the list, but it's one of those things. And so I'm intentional about where I spend my time. I'm intentional about things like I take my kids' birthdays off from work. Always have, always will. And there have been times where, once or twice where you run into a conflict and you figure out a way to juggle. But I set my boundaries and I stick to them. And I let it ebb and flow, right? And so if I have a week where, I've been traveling or something like that, and I'll take Friday off and pick up the kids from school, and and I do things like I always have school calendars loaded into my work calendar, and so I might look and see a couple of weeks out, hey, the kids are off that day. Why don't I'll clear that day and go do something. Because in the end, for what I believe is my children aren't going to remember whether or not I was an 8 to 5 dad or a 8 to 12 dad. Like I don't think kids' memories are around the specifics. I think kids' memories are around a sense of, did you make time to have experiences with me? And I make sure that I'm able to do that. It's hard. There are times where it's challenging. And then I would say the most important piece for me of being able to do that is my wife, right?
Yeah.
Is having someone at home. If she and I both worked, I don't know that we'd have 5 kids. I think it'd be hard. And so the divide and conquer of personal responsibilities and work responsibilities we do on a daily, weekly basis to make sure that everything gets covered.
You guys plan, your wife and you, time to get away as well?
We do. We try to. And if I were to say if there was one thing that suffers, it's probably that.
Yeah.
Because when, Friday nights are really, really funny nights for us. You get to the end of the week. She's been busting her butt all week. I've been busting my butt all week. And, we always say, well, let's sit down and have a glass of wine. We're going to watch a show. And by 10 o'clock we're both asleep
Passed
on the
out,
couch.
right?
you know. So best laid plans. But if I would say that's probably the one thing that probably ends up suffering, because she's busy with 5 kids and I'm busy with my job.
Yeah. So I always look at it as not work-life balance, but I think there's work, there's family, and then there's personal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think people group family and personal together, but I think it's very separate. I think people really need time for
Completely
themselves too. So is there some activity you do, somewhere you
I
go?
fish. I fish from a kayak.
Oh, really?
Which is a very solitary thing to do. So I have a 14-foot fishing kayak. I throw it on top of my car. I fish the city lakes. I try to do lakes where there's no boats.
Really?
And I fish the city lakes, and I get up 5, 6 in the morning and I go do that. And that is my solitary time.
Is that something you only do on the weekends, or you do it before work?
I only on the weekends now. I've toyed with this idea of could I ever do it after work or before work or something like that. Before work would be tough.
Yeah.
But after work,
yeah.
I've never done it though. In all the years I've been kayak fishing, I've actually never gone and
So what kind of kayak do you have?
It's a 14-foot Wilderness Systems tarpon, and I've rigged it up. I've used a milk crate to build a rod holder, and I've put a depth finder on it and the whole 9 yards. So it's
when you're out there fishing, I think for leaders in any sort of business or any sort of area, I find that when they find that place of solitude, they start working again.
Yeah.
And they start thinking about work.
Yeah.
You think about your family and that stuff, but it seems like, when people go and find solitude, they tend to go right back to their office.
Yeah, I don't. I think that's. I don't. And I think that's why I enjoy it. It's probably one of the few times that I don't think about work. It really is. It's mind clearing for me, and that's why. That's why I enjoy doing it. I'm focused on the lure and the line.
You're focused on what you're doing.
I'm focused on what I'm doing, and there are a lot of other things that I do that I also enjoy, that don't give me the same, I would guess, clarity of mind that fishing does. And I think part of it is the notion of fishing from a kayak and having to paddle. I think there's the physical nature of it combined with fishing. I actually think helps versus if I were in a boat tooling around trolling. So for me, it's been nice. It's been a nice respite from everything else that's going on in my life.
Yeah, for me, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I don't have time to think about anything but that when you're doing submission grappling with somebody else. Yeah, it consumes your mind. But you need things that consume your mind. In order, I agree. To have that separation.
I agree.
I think there's a lot of people that are in the corporate world that act as athletes, and they're corporate athletes. Thinking in terms of that, do you spend a lot of time training in the role that you're in or learning?
I do. To think of as a corporate like for me, it's all about skills, right? And so going from Target to this role, there are muscles here that I'm exercising that I never really got to exercise at Target. For example, smaller company. I was never really involved in trying to figure out how we were going to get ready for earnings at Target. I was never ever involved in doing a monthly or a quarterly business review with the executive committee. And so there's some of what I call broader leadership muscles that I'm able to develop in the role that I'm in now that I haven't had an opportunity to develop in the past. And some of that for me is very, very intentional because I know I haven't had a chance to do it. And if I want to round myself out, I seek out those opportunities. And this idea of being of an athlete, I think there's athlete refining existing skills, and then there's athlete learning new ones. And I'm more in the camp of athlete learning new ones and stretching from that perspective than I am constantly trying to refine and become better at what's already in my toolbox.
In terms of structure, do you have like a morning routine?
Not so much per se. I mean, I think I get up early.
Yeah.
I check email first thing in the morning. Because it's quiet in my house.
Yeah.
So if there's anything about morning routine is.
Do you beat the kids out of bed?
Oh gosh, but yeah, I beat everyone out of bed.
Okay.
By far. I mean, I especially now in the summer, if I'm up at 5 a.m., there may not be another soul up in the house before 7:30.
Okay.
And I'm usually up at 5 or 5:30. My morning routine is the silence, the catch up. There are a lot of mornings where I'll just go sit on the porch and thumb through email on my phone and get caught up and enjoy a moment of no one bothering me. And that's nice.
Where do you go for staying up on technology and trends and what's going on out there? Is there publications or podcasts or things like that?
So I'm a big Flipboard fan, and
Okay.
I think because it's easy and I can do it very quickly on my iPad. So there's a series of,
Flipboard's the app that's kind of like an RSS feed?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I still subscribe. I still subscribe to a lot of digital and
Yep.
retail news feeds. I think just because I find it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then now, as I work for Aimia, I'm much more focused on loyalty and the incentive market than I ever have been.
Okay.
Have been before. But that one's easy for me. It's hard for me to be a book reader, just because I don't have the time. That makes it challenging. But
Yep.
with my iPad, I can do it. In bed at night. I can do it in the mornings. That's been a good one for me.
Yeah. Are there books that you've read that influenced you?
Good to great.
Good to great.
Yeah.
What about good to great?
I think the simplicity of leadership, what struck me about Good to Great, when I read it years ago now, is the whole idea of superstar leadership or superstar companies
Yep.
versus the simplicity of approach, the simplicity of style, the simplicity of strategy.
Yep.
Because I'm not a brainiac, right? I'm not going to be one of those guys who's going to sit down for 4 hours and come back to you with the biggest, brightest, greatest strategy that's out there.
Yeah.
I will help my team come to that.
Yep.
Right? And so that notion of leaning on team, leaning on simplicity, and focusing on what you are really good at has always resonated with me.
I'm a big fan of that book too. Reading that book and doing what I do and looking at teams and looking at leadership, it all comes back to what I always believe is the answer is having the right people.
Yep, I agree.
And I always say my Venn diagram, all 3 circles say people.
Yeah.
And but that book just really confirmed that for
Yeah.
me too. I think it's a great book. I think a lot of people like that book. Visiting a lot of offices of people,
Yeah.
I often see that book on their bookshelf almost in every case.
And and it's funny too because there's maybe, I'm trying to remember the name of the other one, because I don't read a whole lot of books. There's not a lot of them that have resonated with me. That one resonated, and I'm drawing a blank on. There was another one that was not just about work, but it was about how you balance the different tenets of your life. And what the notion of balance is.
Okay.
It is for you.
Well, if you look it up, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Cool.
Look at that timing. That's perfect. That's great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.